And we are live. With me today, I have Serious Duffer, or as I'll be calling him, Duff. You can find Duff over at Rovertime Podcast or AAA Podcast. Links are in the description below. You'll find that Duff often talks about news and all sorts of sundry. Today, however, we're going to try to stay away from the news and politics and go into something a little more casual. So if anybody's ever watched Inside the Actor's Studio, I'm taking a page from James Lipton's questionnaire, and we're going to be going through that, followed by just like a topic of the week that I had picked. Duff, if you'd like to say hi and maybe add a little bit to that introduction.
Yeah, no, hi there, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Duffer Life or Serious Duffer, depending on where you find me. And I am a Patreon enthusiast, and I watch way too many podcasts. And hence, I seem to think that I am an authority on nothing, but I like to talk about everything. So thanks for having me on there, JP.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for being my first guest, really. I think I've done one other kind of just discussion with a friend, but this is the first time I'm actually trying to take on the role of interviewer. So this is going to be about you. And we're just going to ask kind of fun questions. So I'm going to just jump right into it. And the first question, try not to laugh, but answer it as seriously as you can. What is your favorite word?
Indubitably.
Indubitably. Why is that?
I forget which show it was, but there was a spoof on Sherlock Holmes, or maybe it was a spoof on Dr. Watson. And so they would ask serious questions, and it would be indubitably Mr. Holmes or indubitably Mr. Watson. And it's like when you actually take the word apart, all it means is yes, as you said. But if you ever want to sound clever and look like you're stringing thoughts together in some sort of competent way, you'd be like, and indubitably, the answer is this. And it's like, well, yes, because you just said the answer is this because I said it's this.
Yeah, it's such a. I didn't realize. Yeah, I mean, I knew what the word meant, but I never thought of it as like such a mouthful for such a simple concept. I want to come up with like a list of just those words.
There are some good ones. You just got to stay away from the jargon. That's where, if we're going to go slightly political, that's where a lot of social scientist papers, and even a lot of science papers in general, and a lot of the postmodernist stuff, they like to throw words where if you actually looked at them in context, their meaning is not obvious. And it's just like, wow, that's cool. But at the same time, I have no idea what I just read.
It was like 20 syllables. Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so very related. And this is going to go fast. So we're going to, as you answer, I'm going to try to like dive in and go because there are only 10 questions. Although we can jump into whoever this Marcel Proust is. He's got another questionnaire. But number 2, what is your least favorite word?
Oh, dear. Can I give you my least favorite phrase?
And this is uncensored, so you can you don't have to censor yourself. But go ahead.
Can I go for a phrase instead of a word?
Sure.
That's a good question. I'll have to think about it.
Oh. That was like wait, I'm confused. Are you answering my question with that, or is that actually...
That is the phrase which I loathe the most, because you'll ask something and somebody will literally go, oh, that's a good question. I will have to think about it. And it wouldn't be so frustrating if they actually did. But more often than not, that's an, oh, shit, I don't want to answer this. Requires too much thought. Let's just put a pin in this, and we will move on to something else and pretend they didn't speak. And I find that utterly frustrating. I know I do it, but I find it frustrating when I do it too, because it's like, if you say that's a good question, then it should be good, shouldn't it? But it's like, wouldn't the house be better if it was red? Oh, well, that's a good statement, but we're going to paint it black anyways. So it's like, it isn't good. That's the oxymoron of good, because you're going on something which is not good. So it's the ultimate, like, let's see if I can ditch this conversation kind of transition.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've definitely had that one used on me. But I also knew somebody who I would ask her a question and she'd go, hold on, let me think about that. And then I would say, okay. And she'd, hold on. And then after about 10, 20 seconds of thinking and awkward silence, she'd actually come with an answer. So I guess there's a little subtlety between let me think about that, I'll get back to you, versus let me think about that and then actively doing so.
Well, it's also within the context of where it's being said, because oftentimes within the internet sphere, there's kind of the stereotype that someone says that, and then the next thing you get from them is, this user has been blocked. Or this user is no longer here, kind of thing, or do not contact me again. But that actually hasn't ever happened to me, but that's kind of the cynical persuasion that I get when people say that, because it's often said in an online context, usually during Q&As and stuff, and then the question is immediately dropped, never to appear again. And I can get it. Sometimes those questions that lead to that response might be out of your wheelhouse, but you understand they're a question which has some depth and some nuance to them. You just never intend to go there. It's just that when it gets thrown at you frequently, it becomes really frustrating, because it's like, if it's a good question, why can't you answer it? Why can't you give me the time? And sometimes it's because there's like a billion people tweeting at you, or you get that person like your friend who, I would really appreciate someone doing that, going like, give me the 20 seconds to think about it, and I will. And more often than not, that's kind of what this interdiction/interjection is like, give me some breathing room, because oftentimes people will get back to it, and that's totally tolerable. It's when it's not. It's like, okay, let's just shut this down right here, and I'll make you feel good. I'll give you a cookie. You did a good question, pat you on the head, and tell you to go to the back of the Q&A line.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm going to do a Twitter search later for that's a good question and see the results that come up. And I'll post about it. But I'm not going to let you get away from the original question. I want to ask it again. What is your least favorite word? Now, if you could pick a word.
Oh, this is terrible, but hero.
Hero, like the sandwich?
Well, you could do it as a sandwich, or someone who has done great deeds. And my loathing for it is more so from a broader context, that many words are used so frequently and in so many contexts that their implicit meaning is no longer relevant. In fact, it's a non-descriptor. It's kind of like, the mailman jumped the fence to avoid the dog in order to deliver my package from Amazon. He was a hero.
Yeah.
And it's
the
like, well,
he made.
Let's say he's a motivated individual who has a pretty good vertical leap. But at the same time as well, it's tragic, because it's a word which gets thrown out to make people feel good. And heroes, at least heroes emerging from ancient mythology, they're not designed to make you feel good. A hero is someone who stands up against the gods or against some sort of implicit suffering. And they might have high regard, but it isn't as if they have done something that is utterly commendable. And they are actually active participants in whatever narrative that's going on. Whereas oftentimes now, and once again, this is a horrible thing to say, but you have someone who's suffering from a terminal illness, and they suffer, let's say, well, they deal with it well. And people will say, oh, they're a hero. And it's like, well, not really. More like there's someone who has come to terms with what's happening in their life in a way that allows them to pass on or deal with it peacefully, or in a way that is commendable. But heroism is not that, as it were. Now, someone can be totally a hero if they go and do something actively that defies all reason. But if something is happening to you and you reconcile yourself to it, that's not really heroic.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. Now, do you think there's a difference between kind of objectively being a hero, as, via the definition you just gave, versus more subjectively, like, oh, they're my hero. It's somebody who I see that they're able to do it. I think I can do it too.
Absolutely. I can definitely see the nuance and the utility in being able to do that. The problem, though, is that it is now, let's say, a reflexive term instead of a well-reasoned term that can get thrown to people. Because you can have people call one another, someone else a hero, and you go, okay, now list me their heroic deeds or the things which they've overcome. And it's like, well, they didn't really do anything besides bitch on Twitter for like 2 years about something, but they're still my hero. And it's like, well, once again, it's not the right word. And, you know, language being what it is and humans being lazy, it's easy to reach for that term. But at the same time, I would like there to be a little bit more descriptive thought and intentionality in the use of words. And so it's an odd word to hate, but it's how the word is, let's say, diluted to apply to so many things. It's kind of like in English, there's a lot of utility in the word love, but love is almost a non-descriptor. It's like, well, do you love this cake I made you? Oh yeah, I love that cake. Do you love your mom? Yeah, I love my mom. Well, what does that actually tell you about the quality of the thing you're trying to describe? It's kind of a non-indicative adjective at this point.
Yeah, so I guess I could say, Duff, I love you and you're my hero. Or I could say, I appreciate you and you motivated me to actually get my ass on YouTube doing an interview.
Awesome.
The second absolutely sounds much more authentic as well. The first one, I would hope that scares you away, actually.
Well, you know, if I took it the wrong way there, JP, you're a very handsome guy. So, you know, love, eh?
I can't.
So no, it's one of those things, as we say. It's perfectly nice to say, but it might not actually hold any weight or any regard in any larger sense, kind of thing. And there's so many words like this, and it's not a bad thing. It's just, it leaves me really wondering, because I always find in the internet age, we have a sort of a poverty of indicative things. So if somebody smiles online, what does that mean? In the same way, it's like, you know, you try and inject emojis into texts to let people know kind of that you're kidding and you're not serious. Yeah. But it's still a poverty of indicative stimulus. And I have trouble with that.
Same here. I like that. So wait, the word was hero.
Yep.
And the other word was indubitably. Okay. So the next question, what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Narrative. Good narrative. When it comes to things like the hero's journey or the idea of someone striving to
hero's journey.
I know. That's the problem, because I hate the thing which I'm turned on by. Actually, no, that makes perfect sense. But the idea of narrative story, and I always find that my creative process is best done in relation to bigger things, to topics which we need to grapple with intellectually. And I love to have people who I can bounce ideas off of. Me by myself, I can't articulate in the way that I can when I have somebody to talk to and someone who can shoot down my ideas. So both something which teaches me more about what the human life and human experience is, and that's a narrative, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, it gets me thinking, but also having other people there in order to do something. And, you know, I've written books, and none of them have been published because they're probably crap. But the second... one day maybe, but the second book I ever wrote was literally motivated entirely through spite. Someone said, I don't think you could actually write a young adult fiction. And I'm like, I'll show you. So I started writing young adult fiction.
Oh, that's the one I want to
read. But yeah, no, in terms of inspiration, it's weird. So Stephen King describes his muse not as some divine being, but as a guy who hangs out in the basement, who you really have to work towards in order for him to get anything done. And he kind of likes it that way, because it takes a while to get the process moving. And it also means that your own conception of what you can do has a fairly high standard of you. And so it's like you find that nice mix between something which gets you really thinking, someone to talk to about it, whether they agree or disagree with you, and also an internal measure for what you're going to produce that is both helpful for doing things, but also requires you to have the self-awareness to say, what I just did is a bad draft. Let me go through and do it again. That's still a bad draft. Maybe this wasn't a good idea. Let's throw it out. But you still need to get on that particular saddle and ride that particular horse.
That's a good answer. So narrative. All right. So then what turns you off in the same regard, creatively, spiritually, emotionally?
Required silences. Avenues which you're not allowed to delve into because it's either impolite or just something which isn't done. And so, sorry?
Can you give an example or two?
Negotiated silences kind of thing. So I grew up in a Christian household and Protestant and kind of thing. And it's like, growing up as a member of a church is interesting. There's good things and there's things which make you kind of go, huh, what? But one thing which actually started me on my road to eventually atheism was noticing that our religion and other religions all seem to rely on the same basic premise. You need to have faith that God exists or faith that your divine deity exists. But I started reading about other religions and they have this exactly the same idea within them. In fact, they are contingent upon that idea that a God that you cannot prove that exists and works in some sort of way, and that it's not unique to any particular religion. And when I brought this up, people were like, oh, well, you just need to have more faith. And it's like, so if I was a Sikh and not a Christian and I brought this up, you would tell me I need to have more faith. Okay. If I was a Muslim and I brought this up, you would tell me that I needed to have more faith. This appears to be an obfuscation of the problem that religion is a far more broadly human concept or a social product than any one particular religion's beliefs or claims to having an authority. But it's not nice to bring that up.
Yeah. Well, we've seemed to have found our groups where we could talk about these things. But yeah, I got you. In a general sense, it's some things are kind of, I guess, just too taboo, I guess would be the right word.
Yeah, and seemingly things that are deemed offensive now, but if you take them just as an honest question, should not be. And if we want to get in hot water right away, is there such a thing as a patriarchy in all male-female interactions? And of course, some people would say, yes, absolutely. And you go, well, how? Well, you don't ask how. You're just here, you're a male, you're dominating this space. How? Common.
Yeah. I've dealt with that question. And actually, I think, Jordan Peterson asked that question recently where he said, can men and women work together in the workplace? Like, what does it mean? And I just think it was an honest question. I don't think he necessarily went into it with an answer. He actually said, I don't know. But even just asking the question seems to ruffle a lot of feathers.
Yeah, and it gets into the problem of in a place where statistics and averages are treated as actually a negative thing to draw upon, people have forgotten that statistics and averages are not necessarily indicative. They are predictive based off of the data which you've collected, but that doesn't mean that you as a person conform to that particular statistic or that you are required to. And so in giving an answer like, or just phrasing an open-ended question, can men and women work together, and just leaving it at that, the answer would actually be yes, no, and everything in between. And that's actually not a bad thing. That's a really good open-ended question, because it means that you can work on a various formulations and actually take it down to the individual level and say, this person can't, this person can. This person can do it in this context, but not in that context. And if these two people negotiate what that context is, they can totally work together. So it actually allows for the broadest appreciation of human endeavor as individuals. But to say that has such a negative connotation, and to draw on things which you can use as sort of factual indicators of what you're trying to establish is seen as being either really rude or as being completely out of touch with the fact that feelings should trump facts. And it's just like, I can't get behind that, but I shouldn't be demonized for that stance.
Yeah. Yeah. Facts don't care about your feelings, as Shapiro, I think, still has pinned as his top tweet on Twitter. But, or facts don't care about your feelings. Did I say that backwards?
Yeah. No, you said it right both times. Don't worry.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to move to the next question. It's a simple one. What is your favorite curse word?
Oh dear. What is my favorite curse word? It would definitely be the F word.
Which F word?
Any.
Fun?
Sure. We'll go with that.
Fur?
Foobar?
Friday is my favorite word.
Fudge? Funicular?
You're not going to say it, are you?
I'm trying to be polite. I try to do the whole Canadian.
Not on this channel.
Okay, fine. It is the fuck word. Yes.
The fuck word. Cool. Why is it your favorite word?
It suitably packages what I think a swear word ought to be about, which is imbuing a sense of either outrage or importance. It's a signpost which people can get behind, because I don't drop it a lot, but it can embody rage. It can embody just like abject annoyance at something, and it's also one of those words which, when you use it in context, it's not actually the denotation of the word as you would read it in the dictionary. So it has a lot of utility, but it also has that hard CK sound, and like hard k sounds in English do catch our ears. So yeah, it's a very suitable swear.
I would agree. I think it's very, it has a lot of use even in the positive sense. You know, I think it shows passion sometimes. I don't want to give examples because I'll probably laugh, but you can imagine being romantic and using the term. You can imagine being excited about winning a sports game and using the term, you know? So yeah, I'm with you. It's actually my favorite word too. So,
well, and as a Canadian, it fits in with two stereotypes, right? So Canadians stereotypically always end their sentences with A, right? So it turned everything into a question. So it becomes fucking A, right?
A or sorry.
That too. And I'm sorry that I had to swear. But you get to actually have like this really harsh word and then turn it into a question mark, as if like, should I be using this word? So it's like, oh man, that was terrible. Fucking A, right? And it's like, was it or was it not? I just want to know.
That's great. And what would your oh no, the next question is not what's your least favorite curse. That would be a dumb question anyway. So we're moving on to, what sound or noise do you love, and what sound or noise do you hate?
Oh, what sound or noise do I love? I really love the sound of belly shaking laughter. I like it when you get people, you can actually tell just by listening that they are not sure whether to laugh, cry, or shit their pants. And you just walk in and it's just like, that's infectious, because you might not even have heard the joke, but infectious laughter, good, honest laughter can just bring so much out of you. It's so therapeutic. And to be able to hear it, it brings that sort of feeling. Because, you know, people can have terrible laughs. People can have really good laughs. But if someone has a really good, deep laugh, and, you know, you can hear it 2 rooms over kind of thing, that is an amazing thing. It's kind of like C.S. Lewis, you know, Christian apologist, but also philosopher and writer. He was said to have an amazingly good laugh, but also to have a deep, booming voice. And in Tolkien's mind, he became the default setting for Treebeard. So this idea of this loud but wise and compassionate sort of person comes from C.S. Lewis's voice. And oftentimes C.S. Lewis was said to be someone who laughed a lot and laughed well. So yeah, definitely something to be said for that. Do you have a particular favorite sound there, JP?
Me? Oh, I didn't think you were going to throw it back at me. Let's see. Well, I have these the first thing that came into my mind is I have these wooden wind chimes that I like. I hate metal wind chimes because they make that like, it's just clangy. The wooden ones are kind of like marimbas or something, you know? And just letting the wind hit those, I could sit outside and listen to that for hours.
Now, yeah, no, for sure. In terms of things like sounds that I hate,
yep.
I have a weird conjunction of two things that happen here. For me, textures are painful, or at least some textures are. So if I touch them, it's like physically, ow, that hurts. And there are some things when they grind together, it's as if I feel that texture, which causes me pain. And it sets my teeth on edge. Like, you get like someone who has like a nail file, and they accidentally catch it the wrong way, and it's just like, or something like that. And it's just like, oh, that's bad. Or when they have like a cup which has a texture on it, and they kind of bite it like a sippy cup, and you hear that, and I can feel it, and like my jaw seizes up.
Yeah, even you just talking about it right now is like making me. I know what you're talking about. My cousin used to bite a spoon all the time.
Like, why would you bite a metal thing, or even like the plastic kid spoons with?
I could deal with I could deal with the metal stuff is the worst for me. Like my cousin used to, he'd eat soup or cereal, put it in his mouth, and then it would just like grind on the way out. Oh, I can't take it. Can't take when people like smack their teeth when they're chewing, cutting a plate. Ugh. I think I know what you're talking about.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
A lot of things don't make me cringe, but that's one of those things where like I physically respond. I catch myself kind of doing this with my hands because it's like, I don't know why. This makes it feel better. It makes no sense, but it just makes me so uncomfortable.
For me, I don't know if it's something which happened in the past. I doubt it. It's probably one of those things where people go, okay, either in joke or jest, or maybe quite accurately, it's like, you might have some autistic tendencies. And it's like, well, that might be one for me. That might be one for me there.
Yeah. I can relate to that one. So let's see. It says here, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, Andrew Clavin over at the Daily Wire is someone who I greatly respect, in that he's managed to be a Renaissance man. He's done news, he's done theater, he's done plays, he's written his own successful books. He has his own podcast. And for someone who's not actually a philosopher per se, someone who doesn't have a degree in philosophy, he does an admirable job of creating his own philosophy for how he lives and how he lives well. And it's sort of odd for me because, as I say, I'm an espoused atheist. But the way he kind of describes how he thinks God fits into his life and how he orders the world and how people ought to act in a godly fashion. And it doesn't hurt that he's got one of those voices that just sort of begs to be listened to. And so I would like to be that sort of thespian / moral espouser of certain virtues which people might actually find useful in their life in some way, and to have my work recognized in multiple genres of endeavor. I would very much like that. And that's part of the thing which sort of has attracted me to YouTube and any sort of social media apparatus where you get honest discussion. I am one of those people who is very verbally gifted, and I like to write too. But when it comes to things like math and computational sciences and programming and things, that's not where I'm really strong. And so that someone can make a successful career out of sharing their thoughts and doing it well is something I find very commendable.
Well, I don't know if you have would you have any interest in learning programming or mathematics?
Possibly. And I actually do a bit of HTML and stuff like that. But when it comes to math, more advanced and hardcore math, I am not so good at. I did enough to finish high school, and I appreciate what math does for me. But if you put a complex equation on a board, I get physically anxious.
Well, I was going to offer, I'll show you some of what I know in terms of math and programming if you can teach me how to articulate better, because you do articulate very well. A little bit of free affirmation here, but I think you are a very effective communicator.
Oh, thank you very much there, JB. And I might just definitely take you up on that.
All right, we'll talk. So, which profession would you not like to do? My mind.
In today's world, no. I might say chief baby killer in hell, but I don't think that's actually a profession.
Yeah.
But more like along the lines of an HR representative or a union rep. And it's kind of odd to say that because, I think there are very good unions out there. But oftentimes, as a member of HR or as a union rep kind of thing, you are asked to defend people that either ought to be fired, are not necessarily great at their job, but your position is to give them the opportunity of receiving due diligence. But that always puts you in contact with people who might not be the best at what they do, but have developed a skill set that allows them to continue working in the position that they are, in spite of things which would have gotten other people removed. So that's kind of an odd position. And in fact, lawyers would be along similar lines, because you're advocating for people whose actions you don't have a direct control over, but you also have to ensure that they receive their just due. So you might be defending a slime ball, but you have to. God or not God, bless them for doing it. But that I would find extremely emotionally and sort of psychologically taxing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because I lived in San Francisco for so long or if it's one of my personal experiences, but I've always thought of HR as more of a prosecutor than a defendant.
Well, in this context, considering a lot of the stuff which has come out, and Jordan Peterson sort of points to the fact that HR oftentimes seems to be the place that tries to enforce particular ideologies onto the workplace. And that's something I always feel very slimy about, is trying to force an idea from on high onto people. And so it's like, it could be, as you say, it's more of a prosecutor role where you're kicking people out. But imagine you're kicking people out based off of principles which you don't necessarily agree with, but you want your job to be maintained. And so when it comes to like things like, let's say, gender representation, it's like you have to have at least 50-50 all the time. And it's like, but what does the 50-50 actually do in terms of expressing people's talents or giving people opportunities based off of their own merits? And people would say, well, it doesn't matter. It has to be equal all the time. And it's like, but the thing is, that's equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. And I can't really get behind the enforcement of equality of outcome. I can in terms of opportunity.
Yep, I'm with you on that. Okay, we're going to the last of the questions, and then we'll go into the topic. And the final question, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
If heaven exists, don't worry. There's still things to think about even here.
That was a good answer.
The idea of heaven being a perfect place is an odd and late addition to particularly the Christian religion, and certain types of the Christian religion. Like heaven itself, this idea of an eternal reward, and just like a static state of being, a utopian state of being, is not one that I think relates well to actual humanity. I think we as humans need things to contend with, to struggle with, and to work towards, because in perfect states, we tend to get up to some fairly imperfect behaviors, or we get bored really, really quick. For instance, there's this quote from Terry Pratchett, which I really, really like. Terry Pratchett was a writer. He did the Discworld series.
Yeah.
And in one of his books called Hogfather, which he kind of explores the idea of where Santa Claus comes from and why we might actually need things like Santa Claus, even if we don't really believe in them. At the end of the story, and sorry for the spoilers, Death and his granddaughter are talking. And the Hogfather has just left. He has survived the conflict. And the granddaughter asked Death, what would happen if the Hogfather had died? And what Death says is, well, the sun wouldn't have come up. And she goes, well, what do you mean by that? Of course the sun would come up. And he goes, no, the sun wouldn't have come up. It would have just been a big burning ball of gas. And she goes, well, what do you mean by that? It's like, well, it's kind of like things like truth and justice and all these other big concepts. And she goes, it's not like that at all. And he goes, no, actually it is. It's these little lies which you have to tell yourself in order to make the world feel better. Because otherwise what you're reduced to is a speck of dust, and in a universe that is basically just dust. And I'm going off the quote here. Mm-hmm. But she goes, that's not true at all. And he goes, well, okay, take the universe, grind it down to the finest powder, and show me a molecule of mercy, an atom of justice. And they don't exist in a tangible sense. And so when it comes to conceptions of heaven, I think it's more important that heaven not exist, but that our conception of it is not something that is completely alien to human existence, but geared towards achieving our best state as a aspirational being. And hence why I want God basically to say, don't worry, there's still stuff to work towards. The notion of existence on any level never leads to a state of non-action. There is no utopia where you no longer have to use your brain, or at least whatever your brain would be as a form of energy, if we're going with most religious conceptions of what you are in heaven.
Well, that was a beautiful answer, Duff. I like it. I actually have a Terry Pratchett book. It's not a Discworld book. Is it right? Nope, it's not there. But I haven't read it yet.
Small Gods? Or sorry, is it the one where Neil Gaiman and him were co-authored? Sorry?
It's a little red book. It's not a very long read. I'd have to go pull it to see. I haven't read it. It was given to me as a gift with, and still in between the pages are a bunch of 4-leaf clovers. I think I have enough good luck for a lifetime. Because apparently
that might be one of the We Free Men series or the Diggers series. But no, I would recommend reading Terry Pratchett. For the most part, quite a good read.
Yeah, well, the 4-leaf clovers weren't part of the book. That was put in by the friend who gifted it to me. In case that wasn't clear. But yeah, I'll have to give it a read. I hear he's well written.
Yeah, no, the tragedy with Terry Pratchett is that he had early onset Alzheimer's that took him quite quickly. And so his last sort of 5 books, you can kind of tell that he as an author was giving more of the writing process to his co-author or his co-writer. And it lost some of the magic and some of the whimsy that has been inherent in Pratchett for a long, long time. It's kind of like, so Neil Gaiman and him, they co-authored a book called Good Omens. And when I read it, it was odd because in my head, I could actually tell what Terry was writing and what Neil was writing. And I've always found Neil to be kind of a poor man's Terry Pratchett. But a lot of people might like Gaiman more than they like Pratchett because he does things on a bigger scale. And he doesn't, let's say, poke fun at himself as he's writing these things in the same way that Pratchett is. But that self-awareness is what makes Pratchett so funny and also gives him the ability to sort of transcend a lot of ideas that otherwise would just be seen as sort of everyday.
I'm sold. I will be grabbing that book, putting it in my, I don't know if you saw my picture from today, but I finally got a lounge chair for my backyard. I can like lean back. It has a cup holder, and I can read. There's also like 80 degrees over here. I don't know what it's like up in Canada, but not 80 degrees, I'm guessing.
I don't actually know what the conversion would be, but it is currently 12 degrees Celsius.
Let's see, 12 Celsius Fahrenheit is 53. That's not to guess in, huh? For you. Did you hear me?
Yeah. No, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. But I, like you, am currently suffering through the allergy season as it is. Alder is currently out to kill me, and it's doing a fairly good job.
Yeah, I'm not used to. Somebody posted a picture on the Rally subreddit, and it was Rally Skyline, but they put like a yellow filter over the whole thing. It's pretty accurate. So much pollen.
No, absolutely.
So
is that the end of the questions there, JP? Are we hopping?
That is.
Are we hopping to topical stuff?
Yeah. So I host a meetup every other week, and I figure I'm going to try to squeeze in whatever the topic is for the meetup. I want to try to squeeze it into these because it'll give me just kind of some preparation. You know, I can get some interesting insight from whoever I'm talking to this week. This week it happens to be you. So the topic for this week is making friends with people who want the best for you. So it's kind of a broad topic. But when I think of that, I also think of the inverse, which is knowing how to navigate the people who don't want the best for you, who worse want the worst for you. So I was just curious, what are your takes on kind of navigating the friend sphere, especially nowadays with social media the way it is, with politics the way it is? Yeah, just kind of freeform. Take it away.
Yeah. This sounds like chapter 8 of the latest book from Jordan Peterson.
I think it's rule 3.
Rule 3. Okay. Yeah. But that's one of those. This is actually one of the topics which I wouldn't mind trying to push back on Jordan Peterson a little bit with, because wanting the best for someone requires a certain knowledge of them and of their capabilities. So it's kind of hard to trace people outside of a current friend group that could possibly know you in such a way. Unless it's sort of like someone who has been an acquaintance, who grows to be a friend, who challenges you more. And I think that kind of speaks to the idea that we want people, or if people want the best for you, they want you to be a competent individual, that you can more often than not be the best part of yourself as opposed to the everyday part of yourself. And it's something I legitimately have problems with, because I have a hard time making friends. I've always had a lot of acquaintances, and I have a few good friends, but I've never been one of those people who can kind of go out there and make friends, let's say with relative ease, whatever that means.
I'm not saying to boost your ego or anything, but I'm shocked. You don't come across as somebody who has a hard time making friends at all.
Well, I'll frame it like this. I get a lot of calls to move. So it's like if somebody needs help moving, they tend to call me because they know I'll show up.
Oh, you must be strong.
But, well, that or just a bit of a sucker. But I don't have many people who I would think of phoning up to help me move. There are some, but relative to the calls I get. And that's kind of a loneliness within friendship groups, or at least forming friendship groups, because I don't do small stuff very well. The small talk, the sort of like, let's just hang out with the guys and have a few beers, because my default setting, and I'm lucky that I have some friends that are like this, but my default setting is to go for relative depth. And that's not to say that, I have some sort of better take on friendship or better take on communication, but rather that's intense and it takes stuff out of people. So dealing with me for long periods of time, I know, can be intellectually exhausting for many types of people.
Oh, I can relate to that. I mean, I could put myself in your shoes, because I think I'm there pretty much regularly in my dating life.
Yeah. And it's rough, because how do you approach people in situations where they're A, prepared for that, and B, willing to engage in it at the same time, because it's not fair to someone literally to start a conversation with what they would consider to be a nuke in terms of topics. But that's kind of where I go. And I feel sorry for the people I try and date, because I'm like, what's something you're interested in? And then I will immediately go to like DepthCon 3 in terms of like, how do we look at this? Where do you find your enjoyment? What's so great about it for you? How have you grown in your enjoyment of this topic over time? So to reel it back in a bit there, JP, when it comes to making friends who want things that are good for you, I think it's good as a premise, and I think it's something we can strive for, but making the space to find those people is tricky.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'd recommend, if you haven't yet, because it really helped me, is start a meetup. Whatever it is you want to talk about, there's at least a dozen people in your town that wants to also do it. They're just all kind of hiding, I find.
Now, the problem with that, though, is do most of those people's secondary sexual characteristics include things like breasts?
Actually, we have a good number of women in the group. I mean, I think you know about my group, so it's a Jordan Peterson study group, and surprisingly, most of the events it's mostly guys that show up, but we've had somewhere there were 3, maybe 4 at a time girls. It just so happens that Jordan Peterson and I think in-depth conversation is something that men primarily are interested in, but I don't know what you want to start a meetup around, but you could set constraints. You could say, hey, we're trying to, I don't know, that's kind of interesting if you're trying to set quotas in terms of gender though. But given the earlier topic in some of our conversations, but you could do that. But I mean, is your intention to date, or is your intention to have in-depth conversation, or both, or?
Well, no, in that case, many things. So I would be happy with just finding people to talk to and who are actually willing to listen and willing to be listened to as well. But in terms of this idea of finding friends who want the best for you, what's your kind of take on it, JP?
Well, I mean, it's part of the reason I chose it for the topic. Is it's something I'm struggling with. I've lost a lot of friends over the last year or 2 years. And it's hard really to pinpoint why, other than I keep opening my mouth and talking about how I see the world. So for me, like earlier today, I was talking to one of my best friend really about it. And it does seem that, even him and I will have disagreements and we'll get angry with each other. But at the end of the day, when good things happen to him, I'm happy. When good things happen to me, he's happy, right? When bad things happen to him, I'm not happy. When bad things happen to me, he's not happy. So it's like, without even trying, it seems to be that that is a description of who your friends are, if that makes sense. I don't know if it's really the same thing to go out of your way and behave that way. I think, I'm just not sure if behaving that way is what makes you a friend, or if when you have a friend, they will just naturally behave that way. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does, but it's one of those practice versus in sort of real situations is it's hard to find people for which that can go both ways, because oftentimes you can find people, I'm thinking of one person example in my life, who, although we are friends, a lot of stuff she is willing, or they are willing to direct at me. But if I were to try and direct similar things towards them, or bounce ideas off of them, or even sort of criticisms, that would be seen as beyond the pale. So the reciprocal nature of it is, I think, the hardest thing to try and figure out, because sometimes you're just not in the mood to hear that you might have been the one at fault in something, or that maybe you need to lighten up. But the idea that that's not allowed ever seems to be something which is being promoted, let's say either directly or indirectly, more and more, where it's the idea where it's like, if you're my friend, or let's say boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, don't try and change me. And it's like, but if I want the best for you, ought not I try and change you and you try and change me?
Yeah. And I was watching, I guess Ruben and Peterson was on Ruben once, and Ruben asked him about chapter 3. And Peterson basically said, it was an analogy he made. He's like, like if you quit smoking cigarettes and then you have that friend that's like trying to give you more cigarettes, like that's probably not somebody who's got your who's got your success in mind, And he kind of brings up how sometimes people do that as a joke, and if it's a joke, that's fine. But I don't get for a minute that, at least Peterson's view is that you can never say something that goes against what the other person finds, I guess, comforting, or or that changes them. Like, I do think it would be perfectly in line with that chapter or that view to say, hey, Duff, I'm going to suggest that you change this behavior, or I'm going to suggest that you, just do this thing differently because I really do have your best interest in mind. But I also think that there's a way to do that. Like, I have a friend right now I'm dealing with who, I think from his perspective, he is very much trying to set me straight. Like, he's trying to help me. But I just take everything he does as coming in and being very, very negative, So I do wonder if there's like a meta to it where it's not just telling you, hey, I think you're wrong, but how I tell you I think you're wrong. And then also showing that I've even listened first, because what if I'm wrong,
Yeah. And it just sort of goes to the fact that our lives are complicated. And when we have the time for things, or when we have the time to think about things, is not always at the time when someone needs that most. I think a good example of this is, so in the show Scrubs, from way back in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, JP is a doctor, and he's feeling a bit overwhelmed. And
I'm a doctor.
His friend Turk, who's in the surgery stream, just doesn't seem to have time for him anymore. And they can't talk, they can't hang out. And even though they're roommates, they haven't really been on the same page for a couple days or a couple weeks or things like that. And JP has just had it with Turk. He can't take this not being present in their friendship, in the relationship that's their friendship. And he has this day where it just all comes to a head. And he has this one patient who keeps on almost dying. And finally, JP just grabs this clipboard and goes, why is this patient not getting better? And he looks at the clipboard and he goes, oh, shoot, this person's diabetic. And someone prescribed them essentially something which is sugar-based. Oh my God, I'm the one who did it. And so why isn't this person dead yet? And the big irony there is he looks down and Turk is the one who reread the chart and caught the mistake and changed it to save his friend. And it just shows that good friendships last longer than the stresses which might get in their way. And finding those types of people, that's the hard part.
Oh, I'm back. Hey, Duff, I think I lost you for a minute there.
Uh-oh. We'll see. We'll see if the taping actually caught what I said.
I wonder. I think it might have caught you because you didn't lose internet. I lost internet for some reason. My Wi-Fi cycled. Can you just repeat the last part for me?
Yeah. So essentially, the telling part about friendships are those friendships where people will act for you and on your behalf through hard times, because their friendship goes beyond simple enjoyment of, JP, you back?
Yeah, I'm here, but it's weird because I was hearing you just fine.
Okay. But it goes beyond just the simple enjoyment of someone's presence or the things which they add to your life, but rather there is a desire to see good things. And essentially that just gets back to what Jordan Peterson was talking about, is find those friends who want the best for you. But it takes time to figure that out. And it takes more than just wanting a friend. It takes a lot of other subsidiary and more sort of effervescent kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You got me reflecting on like the people in my life that I feel are truly people that I want to see succeed. I mean, I want to see everyone succeed, but I think there's definitely a difference between that broad net you kind of cast over all of your peers and then those few people where you're like, I would give up something. I would sacrifice something to help see them succeed, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's also one of those process things. So it's good to have people who can point out that these are the things that you should aim towards. And, you know, so much of Jordan Peterson's stuff is attaining a proper aim, attaining a proper goal, a proper orientation for your life. But finding how to do it is left up to us. And that's always the frightening thing, because we ourselves don't necessarily know what's best for us. And we can oftentimes get friends who will enable our worst habits and call them our best. And we enable their worst habits and call them their best. And that's actually an easier relationship to work within than one which is demanding.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, I think that's a good place to end. We're at time. Thank you, Duff, for being on my first real interview. I don't know if it'll get a number. I'll call it number 1 if I could put a thumbnail. I just haven't named the show yet, so I don't know if I can do that retroactively or what. Do you know if you can do that? Can you retroactively change titles of?
Absolutely. You can go back in and edit it as part of your Creator Studio app.
Okay. So I'm going to have to do that. So yeah, thank you for being my number 1 interview. And I want to do some plugs. So it's in the description, but you know, Duff you can find on AAA podcast. Link is in the description, and Rovertime podcast. Link is also in the description. You can find me on Twitter at JP McClone. And then anybody who might be catching this video, like, subscribe, do the whole thing. The more subscribers I have, the more accountable I am. So yeah, anything you want to say goodbye, Duff?
No, I hope everyone has a great week. And if you're coming back off of spring break, enjoy the rest of your semester. Otherwise, thank you for having me on there, JP. I look forward to seeing many more of these.
Yeah, hopefully you'll come back.
Absolutely.
All right. See ya. Bye.